You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
Oh, gee, Mary, don't you know me? I'm the old host of Systematic Geekology, Brandon Knight, and I'm here to talk about It's a Wonderful Life on the Drive-In special. Hey, SG listeners, I'm back, baby, and I even got to do a little Christmas treat for you all and do one of my famous SG intros, but I don't know what else they say anymore, so Josh, take over.
I am so excited. I am Joshua Noel. You guys know me from the show. Hopefully you remember Brandon Knight, one of the old hosts, also frequent guest, host of the Kung Fu Pizza Party. You could also hear producer Cooper, his child, in the background, and if that annoys you, maybe you shouldn't be listening to Christmas drive-ins. The sound of children is part of the sound of Christmas, and that's what we're here to do today. We're starting our Christmas drive-in with this year's theme is classics, and we've defined that as movies that are older than 50 years. So what better movie to start with than It's a Wonderful Life? I'm thrilled to be talking about this one, especially with my good friend Brandon. If you want to hear the rest of the show episodes in this Christmas drive-in series, we'll playlist down below. Show notes. You can't see me pointing. This isn't a video. Chill, Josh. We're going to jump right into this, though. We're going to go straight into it, Brandon. And I got to know, if I, for some reason, traveled to Chicago, showed up at your house, made you get in the car, and we drove to a drive-in film, and what we watched was It's a Wonderful Life, and Cooper was there, too. What is the first things that you and Cooper are going to say when you turn to me and look at me after seeing the film for the first time at the drive-in?
Do you want to go to Taco Bell?
The answer would be yes. Oh man, I don't know for me though. Like I feel like at the end of that, I would just kind of be like, because what's weird, I think the first time I saw it, I didn't really make the connections to all the other stories that it's clearly ripping off of. I feel like I might get real cheesy and just look at you and be like, you have no idea the impact you make. Just because, like, for me, I in a weird way, I find myself in a circle of people that I think make huge impacts in the world, and none of them seem to know that they're making huge impacts. And I just kind of always want to tell them, I'm like, dude, you are changing the world. And I think that might be like I get real cheesy with you and be like, man, I hope you do know that without you, the world would be worse.
Well, I appreciate that. Disagree, but I do appreciate that. I also think it's amazing that we're starting here with this movie that for this series you're doing on classic Christmas movies. And at the time, not a classic. Absolute bust. No. One of the biggest cult classics of all time now. But yeah, there's no way to talk about It's a Wonderful Life without talking about the impact that one life has on a community. You know, I've used the line that the angel says there of, you never really know how many lives one person touches or whatever the line is. I've used that before in sermons at Christmas time, like, because it is a true statement. We all do make big impacts. And right now, producer Cooper is making a big impact on people's earbuds.
Yeah, I don't consider myself a process theologian or an open and relational guy myself. I admire a lot of that theology. Mine's just a little bit different personally. But the more I've spent time with these people who study that way or think about metaphysics in a different way that I'm used to, the more I see this thing of like myself isn't just like what you see. There's all these cells and stuff interacting with one another. And same thing with every heart. Like all of us are constantly interacting with others. You can't just isolate an individual because you aren't just you. And this goes back to like a C.S. Lewis thing in The Four Loves when he talks about friendship. When one friend dies, you don't just lose that friend. You lose that part of the friend that brought out some, like if it was me, Brandon, and my brother, Matt, if we were all really close friends and all of a sudden I died, Brandon wouldn't just lose me. He would lose that part of Matt that only comes out when I'm around. And that's like we're all entangled so intimately in that way that it's like, it's almost like duh, like if you left, sure, the world's going to be different and it's not going to be good.
Yeah. And it's just crazy to think about too, of like how relationships with other people would change when your direct relationship, that like first degree removed kind of thing when I barely know your brother, but if I was friends with him, I would see. I don't think I'm not barely friends with your brother. I don't even know your brother, but
might be the first time you heard his name.
Right. But let's say, we all were together at one point in time, like that relationship dynamic would change because you're right. There is I have siblings of my own, so I can picture it of there is a certain way that you're with certain people, and not in a double-minded kind of way or in a I'm putting on a mask kind of way. You just different relationships with different people, and so different styles of how you're going to come out. So yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to think about there's multiple versions of yourself, and that's okay.
Yeah, I feel like we put the philosophy in front of the story this time, but that's fine. Don't worry about it, guys. I mean, because I also think of it, for me, the easiest example is college friends. If I go see one of my old college buddies, it's a cool experience. Like don't get me wrong. I'm not saying any experience is better or worse, but my wife's been there. When I go see my friend, I don't know what to call him, make up name. I go see my friend Q. She's like, okay, this is what it's like. They're little weirdos and they love each other. But when it's me and all of the guys who used to hang out together, because we had this at the wedding, we went to one of their weddings and all the guys are there. It's oh, that's a whole different dynamic. And I'm like, yeah, it's not because me and Q are being any different with one another. It's literally just we are different people when we're together. That's just the reality, I feel like.
Yeah. And I think this is, you brought up college. I brought up my siblings. I think there's even certain familial relationships or certain eras of your life, different versions of yourself, again, not in a masking kind of way, is going to come out. I'm the same way with any of my college friends, even some of my high school friends I'm still connected with, because they know you as they know you by different nicknames. You have different inside jokes with them, these things. Yeah, I don't know. It's so interesting to think about, and I love it. Yeah.
I'm going to make a weird connection here. I started a Kingdom Hearts Substack, the Kingdom Key, and I'm working on a post that maybe is out when this comes out. We'll see. One of the things that happens in Kingdom Hearts that's really cool, Sora's heart is stronger, not because Sora got stronger, but because of all the relationships he made. And I think that's a thing. The more people we connect with, the more of me I learn. Because some parts of me aren't going to come out until I meet this guy I haven't met yet, right? There's a friend I've yet to make who's going to bring out part of me that doesn't exist right now. And my heart can just expand. Who I am can continue to grow, but only as I make these relationships. And in this film, George Bailey can only continue to grow, and those around him can only continue to grow if he's still a part of the equation. So what happens in this film, and I'll let you kind of do some of the plot synopsis, is he's contemplating suicide. So it's just shown what does happen when one person and all the relationships that are entangled with him are suddenly removed. Brandon, could you just kind of briefly unpack what is the story of this film?
One of the quirky things about this film, and I love it so much, is that it is 90% a flashback. The majority of this film is a flashback. You are learning about the life of George. You start the story during the lowest point of Act 3, when George Bailey is ready to throw his life away, literally, trying to avoid certain terms. We are then given a flashback as an angel learns about the history and the life of George Bailey, of this guy who always had these big dreams of leaving town and going on adventures. This very relatable, if you've ever grew up in a small town and you're tired of small town life and you want to see the big city, that was George Bailey's dream. And it never happens because one after another, there is tragedies that come up in his family life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the movie really exemplifies how sometimes being a good, humble person makes you feel less than, because you are, as the Bible would say, I must decrease so Christ must increase. Well, a lot of the times what that ends up looking like is, no, actually, I'm going to pull back so that my brother can go out and do the things that he wants to do. And then everyone's going to say he's the hero and forget about me. And the thing is, like, that's a noble, it's a good thing to do, but it comes with real consequences. The thing is, like, I think a lot of films make it where, like, you make the sacrifice play, you're the hero, and they don't show no sacrifice has consequences. You're not the hero because you made the sacrifice, you're done away with, you know?
Yeah, here you're rooting for George Bailey. You want him to have his life dream of being able to get out there, and it's just one time after another, he has to make the hard decision to stay behind, or to put family, to put friends, to put the community ahead of himself, so that way the community can continue to grow, so that way other family members can have opportunities, and so that way the rich old white guy doesn't get everything in town. Because that's the other story going on here, is that Copper is trying to... Copper? Is that his name? I think.
It is now.
It is now. Potter? Copper.
Potter.
Like
Potter, that's right.
Potter.
Copper's my dog.
Copper's your dog. Potter is a
Rich
wizard and the bad guy.
Ebenezer Scrooge. Yeah.
Ebenezer Scrooge of the movie, who... He's really more like Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, of just like kind of, or Mr. Fish Odor in Bob's Burgers, of just kind of like owns everything.
Mom,
and just, Ma from Futurama, of just like, what's with that in adult cartoons? I just now made that connection in real life. It's kind of like this, owns everything in town, doesn't care about anything but himself in piling more money, and he serves as the antagonist throughout this story. But also kind of this like Jesus temptation in the wilderness kind of scenario of, if George Bailey is willing to sell out to Potter, then he can go have the things that he wants if he takes the easy way out and puts his desires ahead of the community.
Yeah, and you see, like, he spent his whole life putting others first, and how he thinks maybe that was a wrong decision because he's not getting any reward for it. And that's the thing a lot of Christians need to learn. Prosperity gospel bad. If you put others first like you're supposed to, you do the way of God, it's going to be spiritually rewarding. But a lot of times it's going to put you in positions where you don't have a lot of money. Maybe you don't live in a big house because you've constantly put others first. And that's actually a good thing. God isn't like, oh man, I can't wait to give you that mansion. No, God's like, hey, I am so glad you put others first. And that should be more rewarding than any mansion. And I think it is. And I think that's one thing that even like the story this is based off. So it's based off a short story by Philip Van Doren Stern, The Greatest Gift, which was based off A Christmas Carol. And I think that's what the story does really well, is it kind of turns it on its head. It's not the rich white guy one day gets better. It's no, the rich white guy is still the bad guy. And how do normal people react to him? Do we see ourselves as worthy of this gift that is life? And I think that's, for me, it's just a lot more relatable. I've never been in a position where I have all the money and I'm lording it over people. I have been in the position where I've, personally, just going through my own story, I don't regret anything, but like I have seen where my parents couldn't afford to keep putting us both through private school. And my brother had a lot of connections with friends. And I said, you know what? I'll be homeschooled, save money, send my brother to the private school. Like I made that decision and I'm glad I did, but it has turned me into a weird homeschool kid that everyone's like, well, you don't know anything about life. Yep. That's just how it is.
True.
Yeah.
I'm a weird homeschool kid too.
Yeah. Weird homeschool kids.
Hooray.
But even like different things in college where I put others first, or I like wanted to let somebody else get the credit for it. The professor doesn't later go, oh, I know that you actually let them have credit for that. Let me give you some extra credit points too. Nope. That's not how it works. Even just to, who I give credit to in like podcast world. And like, I'm constantly trying to give other people credit and like, it doesn't come back to me at any point, and that's fine. It's just kind of realizing reality isn't, you're going to eventually get financially blessed. It's more what actually does matter. And I think that's something that this movie does really good. Just kind of pointing to what truly matters and what doesn't. The money doesn't matter. The relationships, he seems to know that the relationships matter. And what's interesting is the question isn't, should you value relationships more than money? The question turns into, do I value my relationships better by taking myself out of the situation? Or do I value relationships better by putting myself in it? And a lot of times we can live with this kind of guilt where we're like, oh, because of my influence, bad things happen to these people and they'd be better off without me. And I think that's the question this film addresses that other films typically don't. That's something I really appreciate.
And what's also very unique about the he's going to take himself out of this situation. This isn't like I'm giving up on life kind of scenario, or everyone, any of the usual like thoughts that somebody would have when they're going through this. Basically, there's money for the savings and loans that has gone missing. Potter actually swiped it so that way he could get George Bailey in trouble. And George realizes that if he eliminates himself, the life insurance would cover the loss of funds and his family. So even and this is like a very deep philosophical, ethical conversation that we do not have time for. He's even putting the community first, his family first, by trying to eliminate himself. Now, the intervention by the angel, seeing life without him in the picture, makes him realize that actually it is the greater good somehow that I am still around versus putting the money first.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's like you always are to put life first above finances. You're always supposed to put the pursuit of the community, the pursuit of relationships first versus what is going to bring about financial gain. Even if it is financial gain for good versus Potter. It's such a complicated ethical, philosophical film that we don't often think about because we're so busy crying. When he's running down the street, Merry Christmas! When he's running down the street after he realizes he should be alive, and he's yelling Merry Christmas and waving at people, and the savings and loans building, and the whole thing, like, I'm sorry, you have to keep dealing with
it's a great film
impersonation, but this is such a tearjerker, but it's also just so, like, this is a very deep film if you really slow down to think about it.
Yeah, and it to me, that ties directly into a lot of, I'm trying to not use like big tribal words. Some of the Christian community that I have been associated with as I grew up, that was probably a really long way of saying stuff that people already know what I mean, but whatever. Where you kind of are taught, like, always sacrifice yourself, always put others first, always do that play every single time, do that play. Even communities I'm not a part of, like some pastors aren't allowed to marry. You're not allowed to do this. You have to like really isolate yourself. And what we've seen through like different psychological studies, especially the last few decades, no, actually you can do a lot more good for people if you do intentionally take some time for yourself. I have learned if I take time to play Kingdom Hearts in a week, I am a better me for those who need me around me than if I constantly just calling people, checking on people, putting my all into helping others. Then I turn into someone who is kind of begrudgingly doing it because I think this is the right thing, and I'm not my best me, And I think that's kind of part of what this film is teaching, just on a bigger level, is like, no, the sacrifice play isn't always the right play. Sorry, Cap. Sometimes you do gotta just you cut the barbed wire. Like sometimes you do think of like how can I be the best me so that I can help others? I don't know. Does that make sense? I feel like that's kind of what this film gets at in a way.
The thing about because I'm the same way with my own mental health of just like, I would rather push through than actually take care of myself. But what's interesting about that is that when you're willing to put rest, whatever that may look like for a person, like playing Kingdom Hearts for you, when you're willing to put rest first versus I'm just going to keep grinding, going to always do the sacrifice thing, it's actually more of an act of faith. It's more of an act of faith to say, I am going to pause everything, sit down. For me, it's going to a good coffee shop and having a good cup of coffee and not working on anything, or, going out for a drink or watching a movie, whatever it may be. To actually sit and to rest is more of an act of faith than it is to constantly keep grinding. When you're constantly grinding, you are taking everything upon yourself. You are shouldering everything. You have to have your hands on everything. But to say, I am going to stop and put everything to a side and play some Kingdom Hearts for however long you play to make you a better person. That is you saying, I am going to trust that the world is not going to burn while I play Kingdom Hearts for an hour or however long, you know.
Yeah.
Like I am going to trust God that this is going to work out, even if it means I am going to go have a beer and chill for a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's where sorry, I don't want to go too long on this, but I think we're onto something good. So I'm going to sit for just a second in this. It's where I think, even though there's a lot of good truths in John Piper, Don't Waste Your Life, or is it Matt Chandler? No, not Matt Chandler. Who's David Platt writes Radical? I think there's a lot of truth in some of the stuff that they wrote, but I still think there's a lot of harm that was done where people feel like, no, anything I do that's not directly for the kingdom is me wasting my time, and God's looking at me and he's upset at me, and it makes them feel guilty for just living life. God gave us life and Jesus died so that we might live life more abundantly. And that doesn't mean constantly grinding. And it's where, for me, my current favorite philosopher is Aaron Simmons, who isn't like a huge name or anything. He teaches at Furman University down here. He's wrote a couple books on like Kierkegaard. I love the guy. He's going to be on Whole Church at the beginning of next year. And he writes about like what does it mean to live a life that's worthy of your finitude? So as if this is the only life that we live, what is it that I think is actually worthy of it? And he kind of like breaks through his own life where he's like, oh, I kept grinding. I kept working on all my new books and stuff because one day I'll have enough money and I'll be able to go do those hikes and all this stuff that I want to do with my family. He's like, and the more that you have that mindset, by the time you get there, physically, you're not going to be able to do all of those things. And then you have to look and go, well, was all that work I did worthy of my finitude, worthy of my limited time on this earth? And he said for him, eventually he said it wasn't. And then he describes faith. I love this because whether you believe there's a God or not, at the end of the day, you don't know for sure. And the way he describes faith is he says faith is risk in a direction. And for him, it is worthy to risk his finitude in the direction of love because that's what he believes God is. And I think that's what, for me, that's what this film means to me. Not that it's a religious film. I know it's not. But it teaches me that like my finitude, my time on this earth, it's worth risking that in the direction of love. And you know, and I think if that's what we get out of this film is like totally worth anyone's finitude to take the time to watch this movie because it's a worthwhile question to ask. Yeah, and we dug really into this. Did you have anything you wanted to add to this part before?
No, I think you said it well. I like that idea of faith is risk in a direction. I like that a lot. A good line. If I'm looking at, I'm in a preaching residency right now, and if it continues on, I was going to do a brief series on what is faith, and I'm gonna have to write that one down. That's pretty good. Yeah, but
Aaron Simmons.
I think it's well said. It's risk in a specific direction, and George Bailey had to be redirected a little bit as to what direction he needed to.
Yeah. And what's cool about this film is like there are angels and there's something that might be God or like some stars that are talking. I don't know. I think it's good. It does a good job at staying religiously ambiguous, which I just wanted to mention since this is like our annual theme this year is religion. I think it was kind of cool that it stayed religiously ambiguous so that the point didn't get lost in the religion and instead could be its own point to itself. And whatever faith you do have, I think you can probably apply the message of this film to it still. And so you mentioned earlier, this film was directed by Frank Capra, and they thought this was such a bust when it came to theaters. No one cared about it. It wasn't well received. There's a lot of mixed reviews. A lot of people thought this was the end of his career. He no longer can make movies worth watching, which to me just blows my mind that that's what people thought after seeing this. But as time's gone on, it's been inducted into like the National Archives as a national treasure. It's been put on like several different lists of like America's best films of all time. It's changed. So one question we're asking in this particular drive-in series, what do you think has made this film stand the test of time? Like, why do we still care about this film 50 plus years later?
Well, I think the actual historical answer is PBS started showing it all the time at Christmas time there for a while. And that's what actually got people's eyes on it. Same kind of thing happened to A Christmas Story once that was a bust until it got to HBO and then it was on all the time. So I think that's the actual like historical answer is that PBS started shoving it down everyone's throats and then everyone realized,
good for them.
Oh no, this is actually a very thought-provoking, very I think it was panned initially because of how dark the movie is there at the end.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the happy-go-lucky Christmas movie of the time. Although now we have movies like, what was that one, Violent Night, that came out last year? Like now we have like outright rated R action Christmas movies. So
yeah,
it shows you how things have changed when it comes to darkness. But from like a timeless standpoint, I think for me, I'll answer this from my perspective. I think it can be. I think George Bailey is just so relatable. I think everybody has been put into some kind of situation before. Maybe not a lifelong situation like Bailey is in, but I think it's very relatable to at some point have had an experience in life where you have had to make the tough decision to put someone ahead of yourself, knowing that they're going to go on to better things, and it might, financially hurt you. Your dreams might not come true, that kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. I know for me, when I first saw this movie, I was like in college, honestly, was when I finally saw this movie for the first time. And at the time, I was really big on like goals and dreams and all the like, having a journal to like get me there. What steps am I going to take? All that kind of stuff. And this movie was just kind of like this, I think, initial wake up call of like, you can have a wonderful life if it doesn't all work out that way.
Yeah.
And I think that's relatable for people.
Yeah. I think that's what a lot of prosperity gospel people need to hear. A wonderful life is not necessarily a prosperous and rich life. Sometimes it's just a life where your heart is connected to so many others through the relationships you built playing through Kingdom Hearts 1 through 3. Sorry, I can't help myself. I love this film. I don't think I could possibly explain enough how much I love this film. If I had to get to like why I think it passed the test of time, I'm right there with you. I think it's because it's so realistic, and yeah, it's like a fantasy film, right? Like there's this weird angel and some entity we don't know that might be God, and it's like fictional to a high degree, and yet it's so real and just genuine. Like I feel like it just kind of wears its heart on its sleeve, and that's why we love it. A lot of times when people are like that at first, like I told you, like I started this drive-in, at the end I looked at you and I said, Brandon, I want you to know that you're making the world a better place. Like that's probably the first thing I would have said to you after the end of this film. And a lot of times in the world we live in, and I think this has probably been the truth for a very long time, we don't like when people wear their heart on the sleeve, or when films or books do. We're like, oh no, nuance that thing, whatever. But then as time goes on, we look back on that and we go, man, I'm so glad that film was just so honest. Like the emotions were just honest. And sometimes time makes that better. I think it ages well. And with that, when we're wrapping this up, this is a deep one, so it's hard to steer out of.
You gotta make a hard cut now.
The last question we ask everybody: if you were to bring any holiday themed snack or candy to the drive-in, which would it be?
Holiday themed snack. I really like this would work well because I'm at a drive-in, so I can be a little noisy. Do you know those little? They're like chewy mints, and they've got like Christmas trees. On the center. They're really soft. They're in those little wrappers that are so loud. I would maybe bring those because that would be, I would like chew on it for a little bit, and then it would go away. Then I could pop another one. What are those called? Brax or something like that? I can't remember.
I don't remember. So I had an answer.
Those little mints. I would probably bring those.
Yeah, those are fantastic. That's good stuff. I don't think anyone else is going to answer that, which makes it even better. Because I feel like people forgot about those. Shame on them. I was going to say like the holiday popcorn, like the Christmas popcorn, where it's like some caramel, some butter and salt, and they're like different colors, and it's like so good. But then, because I'm a loser, earlier today I was in Five Below, and I saw that they have in Five Below little Christmas tree Twizzlers that are like bite size. I don't necessarily love Twizzlers, but I'm just so intrigued by a new Christmas candy that I'm like, well, we got to have that.
I love Twizzlers. Twizzlers is like one of my favorite candies.
Man, so me and Brandon are going to share a bag of Christmas tree Twizzlers.
Free plug for Five Below, everybody.
Yeah. Actually, we're sponsored. I'm just kidding. But guys, if you enjoyed this, please rate and review our show on Podchaser or Good Pods. If you're on a laptop and you can reach one of those sites. If you're not on a laptop, if you're on your phone, go ahead and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or rate us on Spotify. And you can comment on this episode on Spotify now. So that's kind of cool. We want comments because that's new and it's interesting. guys, again,
The
show the
comment that we
playlist.
specifically want is what is the name of those candies, though. That's the comment I want. Is somebody
Please
tell me
tell
what
us.
those candies are called. I know when I see them, but I can't think what they're called.
Same, but I think perhaps might be right. Okay, anyway, playlist down in the show's description if you want to see other Christmas drive-in episodes. And remember, we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priest.